Yo, yo, thanks for tuning in to the Maniacal Pod Talk. I'm your host, Brian, Murph in the streets. And trigger warning, trigger warning. Listen, we're going to talk about triggers today, right? Right now is learning yourself before you lose yourself. And so that's what we're going to talk about. It's been a little minute, and I don't even know if I remember what my intro sound like. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my brother Mike in the background on all the ones and twos. My brother, remind me and the people of what that intro sound like, my brother. All right, man, that was refreshing to hear that. It's been a long time since I heard that, and I'm just glad to be back in here. Mike been on me, been telling me how much time been passing. Trav been over there hitting me on the side too with his little slick comments. Yeah, he's scary, but it's all good. I be needing to push, you know what I mean? And so I just been dealing with life as we all do from time to time, and just kind of getting into the swing of new things I got going on, and just tidying up, different health issues that a brother been dealing with. And I'm gonna open up about that stuff probably at maybe within the next couple episodes, because I know a lot of us deal with certain things, and people within the age range that I find myself in, 41. I ain't ashamed of that. I'm proud of that. Things be hitting. And so we got to get checked out. But like I said, we'll talk about that maybe on the next episode or two. But for now, I got my notes right here. We gonna go over these triggers. That's why I said trigger warning, trigger warning. And I feel like triggers is something that we all can relate to. I'm gonna, expose more about my life and things that trigger me as we go through this. Don't plan on being too long-winded, but since this is something that I feel like is so important, I am going to be kind of tied to my notes a little bit, because I want to make sure I put out proper information, you know what I mean? And I don't want to freestyle too much on some of this. When it come to me and, my personal examples, I don't have a problem freestyling that. But for the sake of, getting the point across and us being able to relate and actually being helpful, I'm going to stick to these notes a little bit. So I know y'all don't care about that. Y'all going to rock with me regardless, and that's what I appreciate. And so, finding your triggers, that's what's going to be the title of this joint. Learning yourself before you lose yourself, because we all know we ain't trying to lose ourselves. And so we find ourselves in situations where you really got to ask, like, am I about to lose myself over this? Or can I bring it back and figure out what's going on with me, right? So, all right, let's just start here from the top. Let's get into it. What are triggers? We all got our own concept of what triggers are. Different things trigger us as individuals, right? But I'm going to go ahead and read this off. It says a trigger is a stimulus that evokes a strong emotional or physical response, often tied to past trauma, significant experience, or a mental health condition. Triggers can be sensory, like sound, smells, or sight. It can be situational, like a certain social event or a different place. It can be abstract, like a date or a specific thought. Let's see. They are unique to every individual and can cause a variety of reactions, from anxiety, panic, and flashbacks. And so that's just a quick thought of, you know, overall view of what are triggers. And I got some examples down here too. Some of these I didn't really know, so if I didn't know them, not to say I know everything, but I'm willing to bet that some of these are going to be kind of new to some of y'all too. So I got examples of triggers: sensory, a specific smell like smoke, a sound like fireworks, taste, or physical touch. I never really thought about, the sensory aspect of a trigger, something that you smell can trigger. But I think about that because there are certain smells that bring back memories. I guess you can consider that like a happy trigger, but I never really considered a smell bringing back something negative, so that's kind of interesting. We got situational. It could be a place, a large crowd, a holiday, a specific time of the year, or a day. I feel like that makes sense, and we can kind of understand that without elaborating. People, oh man, people. We know people can be triggers for sure. So this says seeing a particular person or a type of person, or even just a certain tone of voice. And I feel like we do kind of understand that a tone of voice can definitely be a trigger because who you talking to? You feel me, Mike? Who you talking to? And so, people can definitely be triggers. We got media, seeing something on TV, in a movie, or on social media. And I feel like that's probably one of the biggest triggers right now. If we go through social media, man, that thing is triggering all over the place. You think about social issues, politics, whatever the case may be. You can't cut on neither one of them apps and not find something that's going to trigger you or somebody reacting to a trigger. We got emotions, experiencing strong emotions like sadness, anxiety can be sometimes triggering within itself, and that's true too. We got abstract. I didn't really know about this one, but it makes sense when you think about abstract being the anniversary of a traumatic event, and we know that that can be challenging too, because people lose loved ones all the time, people that they really close to, friends, and when that day comes up, you know, it can be triggering. So let's see. We went over some of those. How triggers affect individuals is the next portion that I have here. And just keep in mind what we just went over it and kind of think about this next section. It's only like 3 spots here. How triggers affect individuals. Reliving the past is the first one. Triggers can make it feel like a past traumatic event is happening all over again, leading to a tense emotional or a physical response. And so that's just, kind of flashback, like, oh, this is happening again right now in this moment. So I can understand that too. An intense emotional response. They can spark feelings or fear, anger, anxiety, shame, or panic. I feel like when I think about myself, and I'll get into some personal examples about me, I feel like I fall into that intense emotional response, especially when it comes to anger and maybe even anxiety, if I really think about it. And so we got the physical response. A trigger can also lead to a physical response such as fight or flight, reaction, or flashback. And I feel like that makes sense too. So I would ask you as a person listening, where do you identify, something that you've been triggered? Do you feel like it's a fear thing? Do you feel like it's an anger thing, a panic thing, a shame thing? But like I said, I find myself more so with things that I've learned that trigger me in that anger perspective. I got down here that expose myself a little bit, tell y'all about personal triggers, and so here we go. So when I think about stories about me being triggered, right? There is one topic that I know that parents in general are always going to be able to relate to this. And for me, a trigger is always a nice way to say it. A trigger is always going to be Uriah. And that's my son. That's me. I'm doing my best by him. I'm trying to teach him things that I feel like he should know. I'm just trying to raise up a man ultimately. And so when things come about that's trying to get in the way of me doing those things for him, I learned that that's a serious trigger for me. And I'll kind of elaborate on that too. And so some of the areas that I've been triggered with dealing with him, feelings about being able to make decisions for him, disciplining him, and being able to just freely be his dad. And so, like, if you're listening to me, you can kind of pick up the tone of where I'm going. Um, as far as you say, what do you mean feelings of just being able to freely be his dad? You know what I mean? You might ask that question, and I'll give you a real life example, right? As I was dealing with, the past marriage that I was in, there were times, one time in particular that I can remember, a more fresh one, was, me and her, his mom was talking about him needing therapy eventually, right? And so we were discussing, like, okay, what type of therapist would we allow him to see? And she expressed to me that she didn't feel like she had the time to really look into it. And so I'm like, all right, bet. Well, you really want this to happen. I want it to happen too, as far as him seeing a therapist coming from, about to be in a divorced home, right? And so as she expressed, she didn't have the time because she was busy doing, the things that she do, working, all of that stuff. I said, that's cool. I just find him a therapist myself. And the reaction that I got from that was, no, I don't want you to do it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't want me to do it? Like, you just said that you're too busy to do it and you can't do it. So I'm going to do it. No, I don't want you to do it because I don't know who you're going to get. And whoever you're going to get, I need to interview him first. And in that moment is when I probably had my biggest trigger reaction, because before then, you have to understand that wasn't the first time that my ability to make decisions for Uriah was being questioned. So we have minor situations to where, I'm raising a boy and I feel like y'all have heard me talk about his hair. Everybody, if you listen to the first couple of episodes, you've heard me talk about his hair in the barbershop. I'm raising a boy and I'm like, look, I know what he needs. I know he needs to look a certain way. We're going to do it like this. But there was always pushback from, no, I don't want him to look like that. And it's like, all right, well, I'm his dad, but you taking that from me too, right? Okay. Other scenarios will be like, certain areas of discipline. I discipline him a certain way. And there was always just this real negative pushback. Well, I don't agree with you the way that you're doing this and the way you're doing that. And when I think even further back, because one of these sections in the notes here, it talks about how a lot of times people put triggers way back into a trauma that happened as you were, in childhood. But for me, I feel like these triggers really didn't come about until I became a parent. And so when I think about being questioned on being a dad and that being a trigger for me, um, one of the earliest times that I was questioned on my fatherhood and being able to be a father was a scenario between me and his mom when I had asked that, you know, she pick up a part-time job to help out with, some things that I seen coming about. Um, and her response pretty much, and I'm putting it out there, I don't care. Yeah, she gonna be mad, but who care? Stop looking, stop watching, stop sharing it to your own friends. This is my story, and I'm gonna tell it. But the situation was I went and said, "Hey, how do you feel about this? Helping out for a while because we got some financial hardships coming in, and we gonna need help." And the reaction was more so a no, and I don't know what you're going to do with him all day while I'm going to work. And that was the first time I really realized, like, whoa, wait a minute. This person don't really trust me with my own son. I haven't displayed any crazy tendencies. I haven't displayed anything other than being a really good dad. And so, it was years of questioning my ability to make decisions, years of questioning, you know, what I do as a father. And so when I think about the particular example where I gave as far as finding a therapist for him, when it was just, no, I don't want you to do that because I don't know who you're going to get. That is the first time I really almost experienced a blackout moment. And when I say a blackout moment, like, I'll say it like this. And I need y'all to hear me when I say this, before I say this and after I say this. The blackout moment that I experienced, because I said earlier, like, the trauma triggered immediate anger in me. And I'm going to be honest enough to say how I felt in that moment. And how I felt at that moment was physical abuse. I felt like performing physical abuse. I've never physically abused anybody. Hear me again when I say that. I've never physically abused anybody. I've never verbally abused anybody. I've never emotionally abused anybody. But in that moment when I felt like this person was disrespecting my ability to make a decision is as simple as finding a therapist, even though you said you can't do it. When you were putting that thing in my face, I knew that that trigger really took me to a place that I felt like I didn't want to be in. And ooh, let me make sure I'm on track with these notes because I'm telling the story, boy. You hear me, Mike? Telling a story. I'm gonna just finish it up and I'll keep going with the notes. So that triggering moment was the first time that I really had sat back and thought about it like, yo, I'm so mad right now. In my mind, like I'm just ready to go off. I'm ready to flip the whole house upside down. And I didn't react the way that I was feeling, which I'm proud of that. You know, I do think about my actions before I do them. But it was the first time I really had to sit back and think, why does this bother me so much? Like, what is that thing? Like, I was really about to black out, but why? And that's when I'm gonna just say God, like, kind of was tapping me on my shoulder, telling me, like, listen, in order for you to deal with that feeling that you had and that trigger that thought process of questioning your ability to be a father, like you have to expect that this person is always going to do that to you. And when I thought about it, I said, you know what? I'm gonna try that. So the next argument or disagreement that I get into with this person, I'm gonna just wait and I'm gonna just sit back and I'm gonna know that your manhood and your fathering parenting ability is going to be questioned at some point during this debate, dispute, whatever you want to call it. And so when I say maybe that's what I can do, maybe I'm gonna just expect it now, because every other time, you know, you go into situations, things happen, and then you forget about it, you move on, but then they pop back up and people repeat things, repeat offenders, right? And so I'm like, look, next time I'm gonna just expect this person to I'm gonna just say disrespect like that. I'm gonna see how that worked. And so the next time inevitably came up and I'm just waiting. Okay. I know my trigger is gonna be triggered. I know my trigger is gonna be triggered. And boom, when the trigger was triggered, I was mad, but I expected it. And because I expected it, I was able to just kind of be like, I knew that was coming. And I felt like I had growth in that moment because I wasn't as mad to the point that I was that first time. But anyway, because I could keep going on there and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing nobody. So I'm going to just keep it going. The next section I have in here, it says the roots of triggers, the root of triggers. It can be, and I kind of touched on it could be early experiences of trauma, broken trust, or repeat rejection. I feel like for me personally, it was the repeated rejection of trying to be a good parent, of trying to do the right thing, of trying to make the best decisions that I felt for my own son. It was the repeat rejection of that became the trigger. And I got a more recent example that don't have nothing to do with her that I'll tell towards the end, because I'm still dealing with this particular trigger. Our nervous system remembers even when our mind tries to forget. And again, that's what I was saying earlier. Like something can trigger you and then you forget about it. You move on, you move past it because don't nobody want to hold grudges and stuff like that. But when the thing happens again, your mind thought about it, but your nervous system is still there because you haven't really dealt with it, you know? Let's see. This says, I don't know if I agree with it 100%, but it says your reactions reveal the pain that still lives rent free. And I guess that's okay. Your reactions reveal the pain that still lives rent free. That's cool. Because there is pain in there, and if it's a repeat offense, then the reaction is still something that's still there, a wound that's still kind of open. So I guess I can agree with that. But I feel like for us and for me, what I had to learn is instead of jump into the defense, because the defense would have been to put your hands on somebody, you know what I mean? Or the defense might be to even harm yourself, or, we don't know what our triggers are going to make us do. We had a whole list of things that, is a reaction to different triggers. But I feel like if we can be present enough in the moment to not be defensive, but to be curious about why we feel that way. And I feel like that was something that I was in that moment, like, yo, I'm so furious right now. But it wasn't a just react. It was I'm so furious right now, like, but why? Because nobody likes to feel angry, you know what I mean? But so I want to encourage everybody to feel curious when you find yourself triggered. If you can feel curious when you find yourself triggered, I think that might distract you long enough to, one, stop you from reacting in a negative way, but two, really put your mindset place somewhere where you do have the ability to now think about it and think it through, even after the trigger situation kind of subsides and goes by the wayside. If you're curious about it, you're gonna go back and revisit it, and that can lead to trying to fix it, or mend it or whatnot. Um, I got recognizing patterns on here too, which is pivotal. Let's just go through some of that. Track what situation brings these strong emotions. Track it. I don't know if you want to write it down. I don't know if you just want to keep mental notes. Whatever worked for you. Track the situations that bring these strong emotions out. Notice the physical reactions, your heart racing, your jaw clenching, the shallow breathing. Notice how you start to react. Notice what physical thing your body starts to do when you find yourself in these tense moments of being triggered. How am I reacting? I think for me, whenever I found myself in a triggering scenario, I felt like it was more of my body was welling up. I feel like y'all can kind of understand what that means. Welling up inside of me, just woo, like this is making me mad, and I just feel everything bubbling up, and that's what I had wrote down here. I feel like it was a welling up of frustrations that eventually turned into anger, to the point of wanting to be physical. And like I said, I never was physically abusive to anybody. I got to keep saying that because I don't want nobody taking clips and clipping it up like how people do. Um, but yeah, we just got to recognize the patterns. If we can recognize our patterns of how we feel, and I want to, the welling up inside of me, you can consider that like a bubbling up. Um, I don't know. What would you consider that, Mike? If you was to say you was welling up, if something was frustrating you and triggering you, and you felt it in your pits, what would you consider that? Anger? Yeah, I would say anger too, because that's what I led to after the bubbling up of frustration. You know what I mean? It's the anger that comes out, and we don't want to make permanent decisions on temporary feelings. The anger, you know what I mean? We don't want to find ourselves doing something reckless, because we all know people that are loose cannons, and they get mad and frustrated with a scenario, and then they just fly off the hinges. We don't want to be them kind of people. I don't want to see none of my people be them kind of people either. Like, we just need to pay attention to the patterns. If you find yourself welling up, if you find that anger coming out, just take a second, man. Get curious about it. Why am I like this? Why am I letting this person get me to this point? Is the question that you should be asking. And I think for me, I don't hate, but it's interesting to say that I'm grateful it was a repeated offense, because I was able to counterattack it with just the thought of, I know it's coming. When you know something is coming, it really kills it in a major way. You know what I mean? I know this person is about to, oh, what are you going to say this time? We going through it, arguing, whatever. Okay. 3, 2, 1. You're not equipped to make fatherly decisions for this kid. Oh, okay. What else you gonna tell me? So, but like, so it still make you mad, But if you recognize the patterns and you know it's coming and you're trying to deal with it, it's not going to hit you as hard. And I really feel like I crossed the milestone with that. Um, a lot of people don't know those triggers are, I would call it, a large percent of the things that I dealt with within that household that ultimately led towards the main decision to like leaving overall. Um, People oftentimes think that a person make a decision like I did because of shallow reasons. Some people do make the decision based off of shallow reasons. But for me, this was a reason. One of the reasons that I felt like I couldn't live with is the constant trigger of, because you can, let's just be honest for a second. If somebody triggering you constantly somewhere to where you just feel like you can't deal with it, there's going to be a breaking point eventually. Like, you're not physically abusive today, maybe not tomorrow, but who's to say 5 more years of that won't really bring out the worst in a person? And so, eh, eh, you got to do what you got to do. And so, I say all that to say I'm allowing y'all into a part of what I dealt with as far as being triggered on a regular basis. That one of the aspects that led to ultimately getting away from the situation that I don't have to be triggered by anymore, because now let's do what I want to do. I do what I want to do. There's co-parenting involved, but after that kind of goes by the wayside, you just find yourself just having to do what you got to do. I do what I got to do over here because that's what we're going to do over there. If you don't agree, you know what? One second, yo. Here we go, Mike. You said I do this. You said I do this. I got some good stories, man. It ain't even that they good stories. They're really interesting. I'm naturally curious about it. I'm going off right now. Just bear with me. Mike said that I was gonna do this. Y'all don't know. Me and Mike, we always, I say I'm gonna do like 30 minutes. Mike say, you gonna do 60. We always do this, but he always know when I get to talking, I'm gonna have a light bulb somewhere, and it just okay. So when I do this, I'm really asking myself, not necessarily do I care to share it, but I'm asking myself, do I care? Do I care if I expose somebody else? And that's what I've been dealing with recently. Some of y'all follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I don't respond to a lot of things that could be triggering, because all of this is around triggering. But I always ask myself, do I mind exposing somebody else? And I've been painted in such a light recently. I don't really care that. I'm going to go ahead and tell this little silly story real quick. Why not? Because it's triggering, right? So there's a question, right? Man, this is deep. This is a deep one, Mike. I don't even know if I told you this one, Mike. But when you hear this story, I don't think that there's a person that won't understand where I'm coming from. I'm raising a kid, right? And I'm talking to you too, Mike. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at everything. I'm raising a young black male. A lot of people would say, why does that matter? It matters because it's obvious. I'm raising a young black male. There are certain things that he needs to know about himself. There are certain things that he's going to learn as he grows up, right? And as a parent, my trigger is always, you don't know enough, you don't know the right things, and you're not smart enough to be able to lead him in these types of ways. There was a situation to where my son that I'm raising, this black kid, he's allowed to think that he's mixed. Let me explain this. He's allowed to think that he's mixed. My son is a black kid. His both of his parents are black. Both of his grandparents on both sides is black. We all know that deep down that family history, there's some other stuff in everybody's family, right? But I was questioned on why am I trying to force him to only think he's a black kid when he is allowed to be mixed in the other household. And I'm trying to tie this up because I'm getting mad about it. I'm trying to tie it all in, right? There's always disagreements, right, within how you raise a kid. And this goes into the co-parenting and why I said I just kind of do what I want to do now because sometimes the stuff just go by the wayside. When you can't agree on simple basic things, and when you have a good dad who's raising a son, when you don't allow the dad to make certain decisions that they know is best for raising a man, you get in sticky situations. The women, y'all can take that however y'all want to take it. It's just the truth, right? And because I wasn't able to play certain roles that I know that I need to play for him, he's allowed to think that he's mixed because like I'm in here now, I gotta explain it. You know what I'm saying? I gotta bring it home because it sounds crazy, and I don't want to. I don't. Whew. He's allowed to think that he's mixed because of what he has on his mom's side, generations down the road, and it's triggering for me because of what I know that I'm raising, and the fact that we can't agree on something so simple is outrageous to me, and it frustrates me. But what are you gonna do? You find yourself on these two oppositions. Just you try to co-parent, you try to do the right thing. You got one person saying, "Well, you can be this over here," which is confusing. But then I'm over here like, "No, this is what the reality is. You look like this, they're gonna treat you like this. This is what we need to prepare you for, right?" But I'm not allowed to enforce that. You know what I mean? I'm not allowed to bring that home in the way that it should be brung home because you got this side sympathizing and just wanting. I don't know what that side really wants from that, but it just doesn't make any sense. So that I throw that there, and it's going to be vague because I threw it out there, and then it's too late because I kind of wanted to retract it, but it is what it is. It's out there now. We don't do no bloopers, and we don't do no cuts and no edits, so it's out there now. So I'll end that with just saying it was just another example of me wanting to show him as a dad was real and what he needs to prepare for, with the other side saying no, that's not reality when it really is. And so that's gonna be real vague, but I think y'all can pick up a little bit of what I tried to put down in that particular illustration. And so I'm gonna just look at my notes. You feel me, Mike? Cause like I said, I got some stuff, man. There was a lot to, and again, I'm rambling, but there was a lot that went into making certain decisions about life, man. But anyway, managing and reframing. Managing and reframing is the next section that I have on here on my notes. What time am I at, Mike? Okay, I lost. I lost. So anyway, managing and reframing, right? Pause before you react. Even 5 deep breaths can reset your brain. Okay? So when you find yourself triggered, if you find yourself being questioned, if you find yourself somebody got you in an uncomfortable situation and you're being triggered, just 5 deep breaths can reset your brain. So try to remember that, right? Let's see what else we got here. Name the emotion. I'm feeling disrespected or I'm feeling unseen. And I think I can relate to that too because within trying to be a good parent, um, and fighting for what I feel like the rights of a dad should be within the household, there is a sense of feeling unseen. You know what I mean? There's a sense of being ignored. And so, name the emotion. Feeling disrespected, that's one. And, feeling unseen, that's another one. Ask yourself, is this about now or is this about something older? And so for me, the something older would have been really when I became a parent and I seen those first, inclinations of questioning the ability to be a dad, which is the trigger. Communicating boundaries instead of acting out. That could be hard too, man. You can communicate your boundaries to a person, but if you also feel unseen by that person, like you really just kind of at a loss. It's almost no point because if they're a repeated offender, like we talked about earlier, communicating those boundaries to a person, the repeat offender doesn't really care. They're going to do it again. So that can be tough. Practice compassion on yourself. That's a big one. Practice compassion on yourself. Triggers don't make you broken, they make you human. And I feel like that's really a big deal because I pride myself on being able to, maintain a even, calmness about myself. And when you find yourself, it was kind of scary when I found myself really having like rage thoughts, like, yo, like flip the house upside down because I'm mad. You know what I mean? Like, whoa, like what's this? Like, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm really feeling this. But when you got a trigger and it's really triggering you, like give yourself grace because you're human. You didn't ask to be triggered, but just, be curious, like I said, and really try to get to the root of it. Like, why am I like this? And we have the emotions and just don't be led by them is the key that I believe. Um, I had on here, I had said it earlier, but like, don't make permanent decisions based off of temporary feelings. We talked about that already. Um, I think, like I said, for me, it was all really about just knowing that this situation isn't going to stop. It's going to continue to go on. And like I said, when you know the future, it don't surprise you when it finally pops up in your face. Um, I've been pretty good managing, this particular trigger over the last few years. It hasn't really been a serious thing for me pertaining to, his mom per se. But I did have a situation recently that's outside of her that allowed me to know that I still have the trigger. Like we always got to be, you know, thoughtful of ourselves and where we're at in the mental space. And so the situation that I found out last week that I still struggle with this trigger, completely unrelated to everything I was talking about a minute ago. It was just simply, my son, he he did okay in school. The report card was okay, but it needs to be better, right? And so there's a commitment to say, okay, you're going to be better. We're going to help you be better, right? And so I had picked him up. I pick him up every day, and we got back to the house. He left his homework book. I'm mad. I'm on my lunch break. Got to go back to the school, get that book, and he wasn't really allowed to get the book because of a classroom rule that the teacher had, and that's cool. We talked about it. Everything is cool now, but needless to say, I was a dad trying to do the right thing by my son, trying to teach him to do the right thing. And I felt like somebody had gotten away of that. And as a result of that, like I sent the crazy email. I told Mike about this before we started. As a result of that, my reaction was to send a crazy email that could have been looked at a number of different ways. I'm grateful that it wasn't. But it was just me thinking after the fact, like, whoa, like, wait a minute, that trigger still exists for me. So what do I need to do? And we had a conversation. The principal talked to me about it. He understood where I was coming from. Me and his teacher, we got a good understanding of stuff. It was just a simple breakdown. But I had explained to his principal, like, look, like, I know that email that I wrote was hot. It was hot. But after I thought about it, it could have been a little less steamy, but I'm always used to fighting as his dad and as a parent to want the best for him and to do the best thing for him. And when I feel like somebody gets in the way of that, it's a trigger. That's the easiest way to say it. It's a trigger, and I acknowledge that I didn't realize that the trigger existed outside of that past. You know what I mean? I've never been triggered by somebody else. And so I realized just this week, and that's why we talking about triggers today, that the trigger still exists for me, even though I've been working on it and even though I'm better in a certain area, right? And so I have to give myself the grace. I have to I feel like today, now that I know the trigger exists outside of this particular other person, that trigger still exists in the world. And now I have to get to the point to where I have to expect that someone out here in the world is going to come with the same trigger. And so when it happens again, I can be ready for it and I can kind of know kind of how to deal with it, not so fiery. Because when I tell you I sent that email, I sent it. I didn't I didn't proofread it. I didn't check for punctuations. I didn't check for run-on sentences. I typed it. I said exactly how I felt and I just let it fly. And that's not typically something that I do, but I was triggered. And the scary part, Mike, I didn't realize I was triggered in the moment of writing the email. I did not realize I was triggered while writing the email. So I was kind of reacting without thinking. But after the fact, I'm like, man, I'm just glad it was just the email because I could have said something crazy in the classroom, but I didn't. And I don't want to be that type of person. But long story short, I'm still struggling with, I wouldn't even say struggling. Let me take that back. I'm still learning that the trigger exists outside of the only place that I believe that it existed. And so I have to give myself grace because it was something that I wasn't aware of. And so I'm happy and I'm grateful that I know now because, like I said, I can expect it from all areas of life now. Because, raising the kid, he about to be 10 in March. And I'm sure there's many more triggers to come. And I just can't be this dad that just fly off the hinges every time something come up, and feels like it's challenging me being a dad to him. And I know it's rooted in just wanting to be the best that I can possibly be for him. But if I'm gonna be the best that I can be for him, I have to have that in check. You know what I mean? Because we talked about it earlier. If if you know that you're going to be triggered in this area time after time again, eventually you're going to have a bad reaction, and that's what I want to avoid. So now I have to think, okay, and as he's in elementary school, there's going to come a time in middle school, there's going to come a time in high school, there's going to come a time in, I just thought about this. What am I going to do if he get in a fight as a teenager? Am I going to let it trigger me? Am I going to try to jump in? You can't do that. And so, I got to get myself in check. And like I said, I'm grateful and I'm kind of rambling now that I know that it's still a trigger that exists for me. I wanted to bring this topic up because we all suffer with triggers. I got a lot of friends online. I see y'all dealing with triggers all the time. And I just want to be helpful. Anything that I could put out to um, expose myself a little bit and have something that can, people that can relate with, I feel like is always the best thing to do. And so that's what I tried to do today. Trigger warning. I'm still a ways out. But the good thing is that, I'm curious about it. I'm learning about it, and the best part about it all is that I'm changing every day the more that I learn. And, I can't be mad at myself about that. Um, so I would just, as we getting ready to close this thing up, I would encourage, whoever's listening to really sit back and think about what triggers you. I know in our community sometimes we think that it's cool to pop off. We think that it's cool to react. We think that it's cool to lose control, and it's not cool to lose control. You know what I mean? So let's get that under wraps. Let's think about more positive ways that we can um deal with triggers, deal with conflict, and be better all overall, because it's a lot of sickness in this world. It's a lot of things to be stressed out in this world. Me and Mike talked for about 45 minutes. It's just about how the mind can just play tricks on you. Like, we got so much coming at us that we can't afford to not know what trigger us and to be healthy in those environments and situations. And so, that's what we're gonna talk about today. That's where we're gonna leave it. Cause I went off on a crazy tangent today. It is what it is. It is what it is. But as I do these episodes, y'all know I'm gonna let y'all in piece by piece on who I am, who Murph is, what Murph deal with, what Murph go through, and I ain't got no shame about this stuff. Filtering, filtering. Yeah, I ain't got no shame about this stuff. I don't know if anybody else would. Anybody, if you find yourself in one of my stories, maybe you ought to check yourself. You find yourself in one of my stories, why don't you take inventory on your life? Take inventory in your life, because I got a lot of stories to tell. And I don't name drop, because if you find yourself in one of my stories and you're listening, you know exactly who I'm talking about. So it ain't no need to even say no names. But I know a lot of y'all listening that ain't got no business listening. And I appreciate you for the views. Even though some of y'all got bigger fish to fry, I'm a filtering, filtering. I'm gonna go ahead and cut it on off, Mike, because I'll be having stuff to say. And this is just about triggers, and I'm thinking about stuff, and stuff is popping in my head, and I'm being triggered right now. So I'm gonna take that deep breath. See, y'all, I'm practicing real time trigger warning behaviors, in real time. And so I'm gonna just chill. Um, put some of the rest of that stuff in some other episodes for y'all, because I got a lot of stuff to say. Um, it feels good to be sitting in this chair. And trigger warning, trigger warning. Some people might be triggered by this, others may not. I hope it's helpful. I'm gonna holler at y'all later, because I know when I need to stop. You gotta know when you gotta hold them, and you gotta know when you gotta fold them. So I'm gonna go ahead. Listen, thanks for tuning in to the Maniacal Pod Talk. I'm your host, Brian Murph in the streets. Mike, go ahead and get me out of here, please, before I say something reckless, man. And I got trigger warning, trigger warning. I'm out of here. Go ahead, Mike. Roll that thing.